definitely talk to her about stuff. She's got such amazing insight on social media. But yeah, so anyways, a bunch of us social media folks are going to be at that NAOC conference, and hopefully we'll get to do some more periscopes there, get to talk to you guys a little bit more, get some more interaction, some great discussion going, because yesterday's discussion was so good. It was definitely worth driving halfway across the state to be able to go see Ariel and have discussions about it. So I'm just going to kind of run through a few of the things that we talked about yesterday, and then if you guys have other questions about social media and Periscope, enjoy scoping. Yes, I love enjoy scoping, even when it doesn't always work out perfect. So even though like I was telling Katie at the beginning of the broadcast that I should have known when people weren't commenting back and we weren't getting that interaction with everyone that I'm so used to having through Periscope, which is one of the best things about Periscope, is getting that interaction with people. I should have known that there was some sort of issue going on with the scope. But yeah, speaking of that, like troubleshooting scopes, like has anybody else ever had issues with doing Periscope broadcasts? And like, you know, what were some of the issues that you had and how did you fix it? Like, you know, yesterday during the Periscope, the only thing that I saw that was out of place that I kind of noticed but didn't set off that red flag, because, you know, sometimes it's not until after the fact that you notice that it actually was a red flag, was that nobody was commenting about stuff. But I could see people joining in. It, you know, still seemed to be broadcasting just fine. There was no indication that it wasn't. But come to find out afterwards that people were able to log in but weren't able to quite load up the Periscope, and so we weren't getting that kind of interaction with people because they weren't able to see it. And then unfortunately the broadcast didn't save completely on my phone, and so now trying to troubleshoot with Periscope to get it back up so that way maybe you guys, on the very small minuscule chance that they actually still have it, can actually see that conversation that we had yesterday, and we'll be able to watch it after the fact, even though you won't be able to have interacted with it at the time, which is sad to see. But yeah, that's, you know, one of the things with social media and stuff like that. It's a great tool. Sometimes it goes wrong and you have to figure out how to troubleshoot it either on the fly or after the fact and do the fun CliffNotes version of a broadcast. So, but yeah, some of the things that we talked about yesterday, finger crossed, yes, definitely. I'm going to cross every finger I can to try to do that. And like, if not, you know, we'll just see if we can do another one. I mean, I've got other Periscopes with other SciCommers planned for the summer. So, you know, we'll definitely be getting more and more discussion. That's one thing like I really want to get going this summer, is getting that active discussion between all of us of what works, what doesn't work, you know, why we like different apps and things like that. And so that way we can really start taking ownership of these applications and using them for the benefit of science, rather than sometimes I feel like we're still just kind of playing with them and not really actively using them as like really immense tools that they can be. So, but yeah, that was one of the big things we talked about was Twitter. And so obviously most of you that are on here use Twitter because Periscope runs through Twitter. But one of the really interesting things that I noticed with Ariel this past week is she had put out a tweet, you know, asking if anyone had any rail data. And she had said that previously she had actually gotten people only through Twitter to send her rail data that ended up leading to a publication. And I had never heard of anyone using Twitter in that way to generate an actual publication just from people and their interactions through Twitter. And that was a really amazing tool. Like, you know, I wonder if I just sent out, hey, anybody with mute swan data, I'm willing to look at it. Or maybe the opposite way, hey, I've got a whole bunch of mute swan data that I don't have time to go and look through. Does anybody out there want to be able to analyze it and, you know, then get a publication out of that? And I think that's a great way to interact with other people, so you can get science done in ways that maybe you never would have met that person or seen that person. And, you know, because we all go to conferences, but we might not all go to the same conferences. And so Twitter helps bridge that gap where you can meet people and interact with people in ways that you wouldn't have otherwise, and can get actual results out of it. And I think that's sometimes like when people are thinking, oh, you do social media, you're just on there playing around. There's actual real things that you can get out of it that will help your career. Ariel's now got a publication that she can put on her CV because of Twitter. So use of social media in major applications with both citizen science and big data. Yes, I agree. That's one of the other things I think will be really good with citizen science is this way to engage the public with social media. You think about if you're watching TV, if you're to be able to engage with those people on TV live and talk to them, it is such a powerful tool. And when people have questions, say if we're out doing, pulling fish up on a boat or something, you're able to pull that fish up and someone's got a question about that fish and they can ask you that question right then. That would be such an amazing thing and a great way to engage, not just other scientists, but the public. And, you might get that person, that regular John Q. Doe from, the public interested in that fish and maybe thus interested in helping out with a citizen science program that you need to start, because we all know that there is so much data, there's so much, information out there that we want to collect and be able to analyze that we as scientists can't always do ourselves. So if we can get citizens to either help collect the data or figure out ways to actually have them look at the data. I know that there's citizen science projects where they look at videos of nest cams, and so they're able to go through and analyze those behaviors, and then the scientists that run that program can then use that data that they are able to collect from those nest cam vids that the public processed and actually be able to get publications off of that. And so all of that's driven just through citizen science, and things like Twitter and other accounts and periscopes. Like you could set up a periscope to teach your volunteers for that citizen science project on how to actually analyze those videos. There's so many different ways that you could use it. It's kind of, up to your imagination of how you use things. One of the other things we talked about was discussing academia and research between different scientists. There's not a lot of mute swan researchers, around, and so with Twitter, I'm able to talk to someone from England that does mute swan research over there. There's no other way I would have met him but through Twitter. We don't go to the same conferences. I might have seen a paper along and then I would have had to email him or something, but by being connected to him via Twitter, it really helps, and there's a lot more interaction that happens that way. Other things with other scientists that maybe use the same techniques as you, or other varieties of things that you can be able to talk to them back and forth of ways that you might not have otherwise have done it. And then the other really cool discussion too is Ariel, either a week or so ago, had posted up a poll asking, do you consider your Twitter friends to be friends? And I have to say, before this year, I would have said no. I would have said all the people I know on Twitter are colleagues or just acquaintances that are just social media. Since this year, I can actually say that I have some really good friends that have come just from Twitter. I didn't know them otherwise. And it's been such a great resource, because not only do we talk about science and life, or science and social media and things like that, but we also talk about life. And one of the really good things with being able to have friends that you've gotten through your science Twitter social media accounts is that they can look at your life and your situation through a very similar spectrum. The way that they look at life is similar to how you look at life, and so they can relate to you in a way that maybe some of your other scientist friends can't, or maybe some of your friends in daily life can't, and then thus the advice that they offer you is more attuned to what it is you need. If I went to my mom for advice on something, she can't completely relate to how I think of things because of, she's not a scientist. I mean, she can relate to me in other ways that maybe my scientist friends can't, but it's really great to be able to have people who understand what it's like to have to be out in the field for 12 plus hours a day, and that you can't come back and talk to folks and things like that, as much as you want. And so your relationships get strained with family members or regular friends and things like that, but your scientist friends who have, are going through doing all that research and everything can relate to that. So we talked about some other things like Snapchat and Instagram, and for me, I don't really use Snapchat a lot. Ariel uses it a little bit more. I think it's starting to pick up a little bit of steam with other folks. Um, for me, I would love to talk to people more about it. I use Instagram kind of just for pretty pictures and things like that, but I really haven't used it a lot for science. I've been debating about going more into the whole science thing with Instagram. I kind of personally see Instagram and Snapchat as very similar things. I'm sure that there is some differences in there that can be teased out. And so it'd be fun to have a discussion with someone about that, maybe with a future broadcast of someone who's uses Instagram and Snapchat a little bit more to help like tease out why you might want to use one application or the other, or maybe use both and what different ways you can use them. So that would be interesting. We both kind of agreed in the same thing, like with how Katie and I were earlier with Facebook, is that we use Facebook more as a personal account, and we do a little bit of science on there, but not too much. It's more just our personal social media experience, and we try to keep the science off there because we have so many friends and family on there that we don't want to bombard them with science on there. And then we also talked a little bit about Periscope versus YouTube. So since I was thinking about creating Instagram for future yes, I really like that idea a lot. What is it? Florida Sea Grant, I believe. I started following them on Instagram, and they do a lot of in the field photos and things like that, just showcasing the beauty of Florida and the environment out there. And I think it really does help, not only attract people to Florida, so it's good for showcasing Florida, but I think you could also use it in a way to, if you're to do science, be able to showcase, that, take a picture of someone holding, a baby deer as you're tagging it, or Jordan that does piping plover work up here in the Great Lakes, a picture of her holding one of those tiny little puffballs. Like, she just sent the picture of it to me today. I don't know if she's put it up on Instagram yet or not, but that is an absolutely adorable photo that the public is just gonna love and just eat up. And it's, that is a great way to showcase the work that you're doing and get people interested in it. And so a thing like Instagram would be great for that. But Periscope versus YouTube, I really like Periscope a lot better than YouTube. One, just for the simple fact that if you do a YouTube video, you have to take the time to produce it ahead of time. You've got to edit it, everything like that, because you want to make it a nice, clean presentation. And it also takes forever to load up to YouTube. The videos I was trying to load up, because when I was trying to load up some of the Periscope videos that I had done earlier with Katie, it was taking me all day to load the videos up to YouTube, and it just doesn't. It's offering a live interactive service soon. Oh, well, that's good to know. So basically, like Periscope or like Facebook Live for YouTube, is that what it's going to be like then? Pretty much Periscope. Okay. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes, if people transition over to that, or if, because Periscope's been around longer, that people use that. So that would be something we'll have to look at when it actually comes out later. But yeah, the thing that I like about Periscope, though, is with having the live chat there, is you can get that interaction right away. With YouTube, you don't get that interaction. You've already produced the video and thrown it out there, and then you don't get to have that interaction with people. And I think if you're wanting to engage the public and engage people, to encourage them into citizen science, I think having that live conversation with folks is going to be more beneficial than YouTube. But that's just my personal opinion. There's also some great things with YouTube. I mean, being able to do straight up kind of documentary style things of what's going on out there and showcase the work that's happening. I like that. Yes, the live interaction is huge for my science scopes. Yes, I completely agree. So that's one of the biggest benefits, and it makes it more fun too when you can talk to people live, because sometimes when you're discussing things, you might go off in some way, but someone brings something fresh into, and it makes the discussion that much better. Something else that Ariel had really talked about too was Storify, and I've only seen it used a couple of times. IAGLR, which is the International Great Lakes Research, yes, International Association of Great Lakes Research, yes, sorry, it's 2 o'clock and apparently I'm still sleeping. But at the end of every day, when you're at the conference, they'll do a Storify that basically collates all the social media that happened at the conference that day. And it's such a great way to be able to look back. Periscope's more like a conversation lecture. Yes, I agree. I like that a lot. That's a really good analogy, Katie. But they do, the hard part of the question is asked by the audience. You can only answer one in depth. Yes, especially if they start flying through. Luckily, most of my broadcasts so far haven't been where there's, 300 people and you've got questions flying by and there's no way that you can ever answer them. You just kind of have to pick the one that catches your eye as you look at the screen. But yeah, so at least it gives me a little bit more chance to actually see questions and ask them. And that's one of the things that we learned with doing some of the early broadcasts is I try to, if I can, if I see the question, make sure that I repeat the question, because not everyone sees what question it is that got popped up, especially if they're watching it later on. A lot of times I've noticed when I watch Periscopes after the fact, I'm not seeing the chat bubbles pop up. So if you're answering your question, someone might not notice or know what the question ever was that was even asked. So it's just that simple thing, when you're giving a presentation at a conference and someone asks you a question, not everyone in the audience hears that question that got asked just because it's in this huge lecture room or hall or whatever it is. And so you as a presenter, it's always great if you can redo that questions for the audience, because a lot of times you're mic'd up, and so thus the whole audience can then hear the question. So same thing with whatever question that you pick from Periscope to talk about, it's great to repeat it. But back to the Storify thing, I really like that summary of your day at the conference or whatever else it is. And with that too, you can also pick through and select which different things that you want to add. It's not going to be just someone like me when I'm at a conference. I basically bombard everyone with stuff. I'm just, in a way, it floods everyone's newsfeed. But with Storify, you can pick out some of those people who maybe just tweeted once or twice or Instagrammed, one photo through the day that might not have got noticed because either one, they don't have a lot of followers, or two, they're not constantly posting throughout the day. You can pick out those smaller accounts and be able to highlight them in the Storify. And Ariel said that she also likes to use it for her research. So she'll be tweeting during her field season. And so she'll put a hashtag about, so for example, for this year it might be Rails 2016. And so she can go back and look at that hashtag and be able to pull out the different tweets and posts and things like that that she had made throughout the field season. Then she'll be able to gather that all together into just one nice, smooth looking post in Storify of where everyone can go back through and see, oh, that's the summary of everything that happened in the field season. And I really like that a lot. It's something I want to look a little bit more into and see about using, because I think that's a really good way to, just basically sum up everything. So also, we talked about how social media is a networking tool, and it's really good. The comparison that we ended up kind of coming up with, it's almost like having a conference in your phone. You are getting to network and talk to people live through social media, and that is such a powerful tool. And I think a lot of people, when they don't know too much about social media, are saying, you know what, it's just something that you're playing on, you're joking around. Ariel's example was, oh, you're just watching cat videos all the time. And people who don't know the power of social media, think that you're just the teenager watching cat videos, when really it's so much more powerful. The number of people that I've been able to talk to through Twitter and get to know just via Twitter, it's really broadened my base in science of who I can relate to and talk to, and that is so powerful. It's really helped out. And so it's, like we said, just that conference in your phone, you're able to do the exact same things that you would do at a conference. You'll get to know people, talk to them about different issues with your research, other stuff, and all within your phone. And so for people who might not be able to go to a conference, or maybe you will only be able to be there for a day or whatever else it is, it allows you that way to still kind of have that conference experience in your phone. And I think when different, maybe your advisor who's not real big into social media or someone else, that's a great way to explain the power of it. It's also the ease of it too. It really doesn't take a lot of time to do social media. You can do a little bit in the morning, a little bit midday, a little bit in the afternoon post. You can use different applications that will post. Speaking of networking, what do you think of LinkedIn? I do have LinkedIn. When it first came out, I made sure I put stuff up there, but it's really, I kind of almost, at least for me, and maybe it's because I'm not on there a lot, I feel like it's basically just throwing up your CV on a screen, and I don't know how much people actually use it to look at other folks. I know when there was something that I was interested in, not my advisor, but someone else that I was really close with at the university who was giving me advice on different things, sent my LinkedIn page to somebody for me to have them just look at it and see who I was. And so in that way, it can be powerful because it's basically just sending an online CV to someone. I really haven't used it for anything else. I don't know how much people are using it for messaging back and forth and talking back and forth. I did a little bit on their initial, but I really haven't used it much since then. Because my department recommends it, don't really use it. Yes. Yeah, I kind of feel like it's a stagnant application. I don't know, maybe that's the right terminology for what I'm thinking of, but it's just, I personally don't use it a lot, but maybe other people do in a way. I don't know if it's better just to have your own website that thus you could have your CV up on and make it a little bit more about you, because then on your website you could have videos of you doing research, other things you can, I think you just make it much more robust than what you could with LinkedIn. Anyone feel free to prove me wrong, because like I said, I'm not overly big in the use of LinkedIn, so I could be horribly wrong and it could be much more powerful than I know, but just because I haven't really used it, who knows. But yeah, so the ease of everything, and then like we were talking about earlier, using social media as outreach, that was the other big thing. Is a lot of times it feels like with social media, and I could be wrong with the people that are watching right now, I know Katie's a scientist, I forget who else is on, because you're all flown by so fast, but you're almost just scientists talking to other scientists, and at some point in time you have to step out of that through social. I was science cat. But sometimes the whole initial point, I think, of social or science communication through social media is to engage the public. And I think sometimes we forget that, and we just are talking to each other and not necessarily talking out to the public. I like the general public with my science folks. Yes, I need to do more of that. I'm hoping with doing field scopes of actually having, getting to see people in the field and doing the research. I'm hoping that will engage more people in the public. There are several science scopers reaching out to the public. Yeah, and maybe that's something of where, I don't know, what way that we can really get them all well known, or figure out a way to collect them all together that people can thus, get onto them. Sometimes we worry as scientists, we get stuck in the echo chamber. Yes, that's a very good term with that, Katie. Yeah, I like that a lot. It does feel like that. It's definitely great sometimes to be in there, because you can talk back and forth with each other about it before maybe you go engage out in the public, but sometimes it just kind of gets to be the same discussion over and over again, and it just never goes beyond that. I use a list I share at the beginning of my scopes of other science scopes. Oh, I really like that idea. So basically, is it kind of like how I did with this, publicizing the workshop that's coming up at NAOC later? Do you do something like this, or is it just a printout? Okay, I really like that. Yeah. Do you find that doing this kind of thing with doing the visual like this helps out versus giving a list later that you would put up on Twitter? Because with Twitter you've only got so much, and so say I've got a larger list here, of people is like this visual thing. Does that give people enough time to actually go through and do a snapshot? Okay, yep, so it's easy. Yep. Okay, good. That's what I was hoping, but you know, that was the first time I've ever employed something that sending people away is a barrier. Okay. So yeah, that was also too, like, you know, with like when you're saying sending them away as a barrier, you mean like, okay, I'm gonna send them to a different account, or like by having this here, this creates the barrier. I guess I'm not completely clear of what you're saying with the barrier aspect of sending people away, which of course is kind of hard for someone to explain through a quick chat on here. I might have to make you do a scope so that way then I can chat and ask questions later. But it's a business barrier. The physical will have to leave your scope. Oh, yep, I gotcha. Yep, I agree. Yes, yep, definitely for sure. So, yeah. But yeah, so it's trying to make your scopes more attainable to public outreach and things like that, and for citizen science and other stuff, I think is going to be the ultimate goal for this kind of communication for me. I still definitely want to be able to have chats back and forth with other scientists about things and ideas that they have, because people will have different experiences, because there is so much as far as different applications and things, so it's a really great learning experience with stuff. But other than that, that's really kind of the whole discussion that we had. Does anybody else want to talk about other things? I'm open to any sort of SciComm thing, research-wise. You know, what's going on. The fact that it's, for some reason, really cold today at the middle of June. Yesterday, during the scope with RL, I felt like I was sweating through absolutely everything because it's so warm, and now today I'm having to actually wear a jacket, and so gotta love the random coolness at the end of June when it felt like it was the end of July yesterday. But no, SciComm, anything with that. Oh, okay, I've been doing a lot of media format experiments to see what works with science and scope, and cold here too. 62 degrees, yeah. So yeah, with the cold, that's surprising how cold it is. I didn't look at how cold it was out today. I just came outside originally, and it's just like, ugh, it's definitely cold. And I've got a couple asking me anything format to see what works what. Okay. But yeah, my parents are just starting to do a backpacking trip up to Isle Royale. So if it's this cold down here, I wonder how cold it's going to be up there. And I really hope that they actually packed really well. So I'll get to see how that goes a couple of weeks from now when they finally get back. But yeah, the format, I do like for me, Periscope has really been the great experiment for me for the summer with social media to see how it works. Sometimes it works really well. Like right now, we're having a fairly decent discussion and everything seems to be going fine. Yesterday, not so much. Definitely the first couple of scopes we did worked really well. So I'm really interested to see how well this is going to work. And then once we start getting out into the field with these scopes, to see how much people really appreciate them and do that. So yeah, that's something that I'm really interested in, is just that scoping thing. I think that's going to be the big thing that I kind of focus on for the summer. Is anyone else going to be trying to do anything like, you know, doing Snapchat or other random applications that they find kind of interesting? Yes. I guess what's the big new app? Does anyone have like any big new apps that they're just getting into that look promising that they are going to try to use? I don't know what else there is out. Like, I mean, just something random. Last night, was it Snapseed? Was an application I was just turned on to for doing photo editing and stuff, because I was complaining about how the Photoshop app that I have on my phone for editing pictures, I do a lot of so image clarity is important, so looking forward to YouTube Live. Okay, yes. Yeah, that will be interesting to see how that works out. So for sure, let us know, like, if you start experimenting that. I'd be really interested to see what you think of it and how well it works. But yeah, anyways, like, you know, just something as simple as a photo editing app. So like that Snapseed app, like I just started playing around with it this morning, and I liked it so much because it had pretty much all 3 of the Photoshop apps that I have on my phone, it pretty much was doing what all 3 of those were doing, but just in one app. And it was so nice, and it was just randomly, it was Jordan who actually told me about that, and I have a feeling that's going to be my go-to app now for editing photos that I put out, because you know, it might be something as simple as cropping your photo, so that way when you put a photo up on YouTube, or not YouTube, so you got me talking YouTube now, putting a photo up on Twitter, you know, I always try to make sure it's that right size, so that way when it shows up in someone's news feed, my head isn't cut off or whatever else that I want to like show up. You know, I don't want to have someone click on that photo to have it, you know, really show the main subject of that image. And so by having like a quality image application that, you know, can edit those images to the way I want it is something really important. So to be able to find one that does a little bit more, because sometimes you do have to filter your photos a little bit, you know, because it's too dark or too bright or whatever else it is, or just, you know, simply cropping or other things. You know, it's not always putting the cheesy Instagram filter on there, but, you know, just helping correct that photo so like it will actually look like a decent photo to people when you put it out. And so having those kind of applications, even those, you know, while it's not, say, a straight up social media application, it supplements the social media. And so finding good quality applications like that, because you don't want to have to take that photo, put it on your computer, edit it through True Photoshop, which I love True Photoshop, trust me, it's, you know, my bread and butter for so many things, but it's not very useful to have to like pull out the laptop when you're on the run doing social media through your phone. You need those smaller apps that still are robust, but maybe not have the great power of Photoshop that you can be able to use to edit your stuff. So other than that, does anybody have like any questions, social media questions, anything else? I'm pretty much open to anything right now. It's, even though it's a little cooler, it's still fairly beautiful, and the rain seems to be holding off, so I'm good with an excuse to sit out here on the deck and just keep talking for a little bit. The challenge of science on scope is delivering information it's enough density to be effective. Yes. That's one thing I'm looking at for maybe future scopes, is actually kind of refining things. So maybe for like the next scope, maybe only talking about Twitter and how you use Twitter, you know, not just, you know, how do you make a post or things like that, but like, you know, who the population that you're trying to go after with different postings that you're using, things like that. And so really start to fine tune it a little bit more. I think right now I'm still kind of in the experimental phase, just seeing, you know, just kind of just throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there, seeing if anything sticks. And then after that, start to refine it a little bit more, kind of do more like a podcast kind of style of like, hey, today we're going to be talking only about this, and, you know, trying to maybe keep it where, okay, we're only going to talk for 15 minutes because, you know, we want to keep it short and sweet and powerful versus like, you know, rambling on for 2 hours. It's, no one's going to want to watch it afterwards if it's 2 hours long. Nobody has the time to do that. I mean, it's great to have a discussion if you're having a really amazing discussion with people and it goes on that long. You know, I love to talk to people, so it's, you know, I'm not going to necessarily nip that in the bud, but there's also a time too where you know that if you want to have people rewatching things and other stuff, that you're going to have to keep them shorter, because people don't always have 2 hours to watch everything, or maybe even where you do, like if you know different audiences will require different scope approaches, like general public versus fellow scientists. Yes. And that might be something that like we talk about, you know, how do we try to hit those different folks, like how the audience is constantly coming and going, so teaching has to be concise, short, and effective. Yes. Yeah, I like that. So, you know, I think with having like the shorter scopes might be the best way to do that. And then, or if you decide that you were going to do a longer one, say, hey, the first 10 minutes we're going to be talking about this, the next 10 minutes we're going to talk about that, because with the scopes you can scroll through and get to a certain time point. So if you know someone was going to start talking about something at some point in time, that might be a way to go. You know, kind of like when you're listening to NPR or something and they have like 5 topics that they're going to talk about in the hour. I do 2-hour scopes, but tend to repeat my information every 10 minutes. Oh, that's interesting. So like when you have new people come in, they can kind of get like an update of what was talked about real quick and be brought back up to speed. Is that what I'm gathering from what you're saying? Because that would be good. Because yeah, there's more people that are logging on, but the discussion that we've been having for the last, I don't know how long I've been talking. Yeah, that's a good way, because you don't want them to have to go back through and rewatch everything and waste all that time to do that. So if you can kind of keep it, yeah, people just drop in and say, what's that? And I deliver my info. Oh, okay. Yeah. So do you think it's more like just encouraging people to constantly be chatting and have like more of an open discussion? Do you think that would be the best way to go with a discussion-based scope? So like maybe like in your title, like say, hey, we're just going to have a discussion and it's open format for everyone to talk. Do you think maybe then you would have more people interacting with you, rather than like if you said at the beginning, hey, we're just doing an interview with someone, and so then it kind of becomes, more of a broadcast versus an interaction scope? Or if you're doing a demonstration scope, that there might be more of a teaching where the audience starts to talk to itself after 34 people. Lectures turn into group hangouts. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So social juggling is important. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm interested to see how, as these continue to grow, because I'm assuming if everyone likes these and we keep doing them and it keeps building, to see once we start dealing with some of those larger audiences, what happens. It'll be interesting to have to try to juggle that for sure, because like I said, I've watched some scopes where there's 300 people on there and it's maxing out with the number of folks that can actually chat, and it's just the little chats that are flying by on the side there is just no way anyone could ever read all of that. Like I have some huge scopes, 1,000 managing odds is critical. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how you would do that, because like I, as the audience member watching that scope, it's just like I can barely keep up with it, much less if you're having to talk, and especially if you're talking with someone else on your scope, like you're interacting live with someone next to you. You want to be able to talk and look at that person, so you're not always looking at your screen seeing what topics are being or questions are being asked. And so I've seen with some of those scopes, some folks have gotten to the point where they are constantly asking the same question over and over again, knowing that at some point they're hoping that that person who is broadcasting is going to notice that question, because they've realized that they're not looking at the screen, they're looking at the person that they're talking to. So part of it is speaker delivery, intense passion of what's being filmed, engages the audience. Yes, I think that agrees. I agree with that. Do you think that there's not just the passion that you have for the topic, but also what it is you're talking about? Like if you're doing something more interactive with people versus just being that talking head, do you think that would engage people more that way? Or if you, like, for me, this is kind of interesting. This is the first time I've done where it's just me. Like all the other scopes I've done, it's been with someone else there. It's not just me talking the whole time, or it's, been, people doing presentations. And so I'm not having to completely carry the scope. And so like I'm finding this kind of interesting, and I'm wondering how successful people have been with doing an individual scope versus having those other interesting components of having, multiple people to help facilitate that discussion. Yeah, a trick I learned is literally reading every comment out loud. People love that engagement. Yeah, that was one of the first things that we learned when Katie and I did our first scope at IAGLR, was rereading the questions, and that way people know exactly what it is that you're talking about. Because if you just randomly start answering a question but people aren't really sure what question it is that you're answering, they're not going to be able to really follow along. Like all of a sudden you've just changed the subject and they don't really know why. And so I think by repeating that question, that definitely is going to help, and it lets that person know that they chatted to you, that yes, hey, I saw that question that you asked, and I'm going to try to like answer that and be engaged in that way. So I think that's a really good idea. Something really simple that before we even started the scope yesterday that I learned from my very first scope, not very first scope, the first one I did with Katie, is I noticed afterwards I was chewing on gum, and it was so distracting. Like I stopped really paying attention to what Katie and I were talking about, and all I could do was watch myself chewing gum. And it's such a basic, like, you don't chew gum when you're doing presentations. You don't chew gum when you're on, TV or other things, and it was just one of those, like, I totally forgot about it, because we were just sitting down chatting. I forgot that, oh yes, we're, having that visual thing. And so trying to make sure that you don't have any of those strange distractions on screen with stuff. I also noticed too, like, where we were at, we tried to be somewhere where we weren't having a lot of people talk to us. We tried to find a kind of hideaway thing, but there were still people that, like, engaged with us as they were walking by. And so that was kind of tough with, do you flip your screen around to show who that is all of a sudden talking to you, or do you still keep them off screen? Like, how do you manage that situation with things like that? Because, everyone understands that it's a live format, and you could have just anybody randomly show up. Scopes are great learning tools to improve presentation skills. Yes, I agree, for sure. That was something else that we had talked about. I use different voices for the comments too. People seem to love it. It's a live performance. I wish I was better at doing accents. That would be a fun way to, like, be able to do it. I have the great thing of, since I grew up all over the U.S., as soon as I'm around someone that has a different accent, I start picking it up right away, and it sticks on me for a while. Like, going to Canada was really rough. It took me probably about 2 weeks to get rid of the Canadian accent. Every so often I could still kind of hear it pop out. Made it worse when one of my SciComm buddies Skyped me for 2 hours about a week after the conference and basically kicked it back in because she's from Canada. But I'm not good enough where I could actually pull them out and do them, like, on command. I wish I could. Just don't have that ability. But yeah, no, I kind of like that. It makes it more fun and engaging, and I try to do it when I tell stories, but I'm really not that good at it. So maybe I'll have to make sure future scopes I always have someone that can do that, and maybe, or maybe it's something where, say, like, if you've got 2 people there, maybe one person is the person who's always asking the questions, being more that, interviewer kind of person. The other one's kind of the color commentator for the talk. That might be a good way to go. Yeah, because I like that thing too. Like, sometimes it's fun just to kind of, like, push play or push the live button and just go and see what happens. But I think sometimes to figure out, like, who's going to kind of be the one more running the show versus who's going to be the one providing, all that off commentary kind of stuff might be a good way if you're going to have multiple people live. I guess it all really depends on how you want to do it, if you want to have just that more informal discussion or not. But with what Katie was saying with working on your presentation skills, it definitely makes a big difference. There was a post a couple weeks ago or something. I forget who it was. I think it's the Cougar or Not lady. I forget what her name is. Is it Michelle LaRue? I'm so horrible with names. I can remember her face, but I can't necessarily remember her name. But anyway, she was saying something about presentation skills of, it's people don't really notice how important they are. And I think as scientists, we kind of forget that we need to be good presenters. If we don't have good presentation skills, nobody's going to listen to what we say. Even if it's, hey, the world is about to be destroyed. If we don't do it, Scope has definitely helped my presentation skills. Yes, for sure. They're not going to listen. You have to be able to be engaging. I've seen some of the most interesting research in the world, and it's just amazing research. But the person presenting it was driving me crazy as they were doing the presentation because their presentation skills were so bad. Whether it was that they were saying I know or like 6 gazillion times, and I know I still have that problem. To other things, I've had presenters where you're right, it's, oh, hey, awesome, I actually remembered a name. I feel that's amazing for me. That's a big win for me today. Yeah. So thanks for looking that up, Katie. I really appreciate it. Oh, maybe I'm actually getting better with names. I still can't say Jordan's last name properly to save my life, even though she explained exactly how to say it. It's, Rudder. It's butter with an R, and I will finally get it down right, but, I will, yeah, people's names it's horrible, horrible for me, which is a really bad thing for networking and stuff. I can always remember people's faces. I will never forget a face, but remembering their names is very, very tough. But presentation skills, for sure. There have been, what was it? A couple years ago, we our grad student association at CMU, we had started a bio buds program. Basically, it was kind of, we had Jane Goodall come to CMU 3 years ago or so, and she was talking about her Roots and Shoots program, which goes and teaches young kids about the environment and science and things like that. So we wanted to kind of start a program like that because we were looking for a way to give back to the community. And really successful program. We've done a great job with it. Teachers love it. It keeps expanding every year. And so I'm really, really proud of that program to see how it's grown. Well, CMU found out about it and wanted to interview us. And so they came in and, did a short piece of us, as we were teaching the students. And then they interviewed a couple of us grad students afterwards. And one of the grad students, he was talking about how, getting to see those kids learn about science brought a smile to his face. And as he's saying this, he is so deadpan, like just the most serious look on his face. And it was just such kind of like that oxymoron of presentation. Here he is talking about the joy and seeing the smiles on these kids' faces, and that it would bring a smile to his face. And he's just like, you could tell he was so nervous being on camera. He couldn't even get a smile out for like the one part of the story that brought him the most joy. And it was all because of lack of presentation skills. And by going and talking to people and doing more presentations, and after this, I'm gonna watch this and see what really strange like things that I do on here, like what ways can I improve. I think that's also a really big thing that we forget to do. I really would like to do more times, like when I'm teaching other stuff, to have someone sit back there with a video camera and actually record it and then make comments of what they thought that I did well with teaching, how my presentation was. Looking back on that scope that we did of the presentations at IAGLR, and being able to watch myself present was really interesting. And I had someone talk to me about the presentation styles of everyone in that group, because we broadcast, was it 4 different presentations that day, Katie, if I remember right, and how they thought that what was a really interesting comment that was brought up was how women, 4. Hey, I'm on a roll today. I can remember names. I can actually remember how many scopes we did. That's great. Or how many presentations there were. I'm feeling good. But what I thought was really interesting, and I had never really heard this before, was he was saying that, because it was all women that were presenting, and he said that he has found with women presenters that the way that we present research when we're at a conference, it's almost like we're asking it as a question. So like when we state, a fact, like say for me, like mute swans are causing, impacts in Great Lakes, and like the way that, I might have said it might have come across more of like, mute swans are coming across, it just was more like, hey, I hope you accept this, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to say, where he said like, men usually when they're doing presentations are like more authoritative with how, and like, hey, this is the fact because this is what we found, don't be questioning this, this is how it is. But like women presenters do it kind of like, I hope you accept this, I want everyone to agree with what it is I'm saying. And so I found that really interesting, and I'm really want to kind of like keep that mindset as I'm listening to future presentations of people, to see if there is that disparity with how people present. And then also if, even if it's not just male, female, or if it's, say younger scientists, so, grad students, when they go up and do presentations, I think, I wonder how many of them are kind of doing that in that same style of where it's, as you're presenting stuff, you're almost presenting it in a way that you're asking the audience, is it okay that I'm presenting this fact to you? Am I right in presenting this fact to you? And so I wonder how many students, if they have that mindset of, I'm not sure I'm right while I'm up here presenting it, even though I'm the expert on presenting this, I wonder how many of them are, does it make me question their research more because they're presenting it in a way that they're not sure about, versus someone who's more sure in their research and more confident with their presentation skills, do they come across like, do I believe their research more? So that's something I'm kind of interested in with looking at that. But general presentation skills overall, like, just get talking, just do presentations. I think grad students can be afraid of being exposed, the whole imposter syndrome. Yes, I think that is part of it. And I wonder if you have better presentation skills, would it help hide that imposter syndrome feeling? Like you won't be exposed as much, possibly. Because I think like if you don't have good presentation skills and you're kind of afraid of your research, then you're really gonna get questions. But like if you have good presentation skills, even though you aren't quite sure of your research as you're up there, you're not going to be questioned as much, would be my guess, versus even if you have really good research and you know your research is good but you have bad presentation skills, I wonder then if people would question you just as much as someone who has bad research and bad presentation. Like, you get what I'm trying to say? I'm really interested to see, like, break that down. But yeah, really, I kind of almost feel like there needs to be a kind of like a Toastmasters for grad students. I think that would be good. I also think we were talking about doing social media workshops or classes for grad students when they first come in, or not just even social media, but also like general media as well, I think would be good. I didn't think that a school would be able to do it completely on their own. So doing it either via a society, like Ariel's idea was like having societies go through and do kind of like online classes where you can have multiple people log in at once. So like say if I was going to do a social media class and you all could log in through Periscope or whatever way and be able to teach a whole bunch of new grad students coming in, hey, this is what you want to do, this is why you want to be on Twitter, these are like, you know, maybe some of the like the basic, not necessarily rules, but guidelines of how you want to operate on Twitter and, you know, different social media with engaging the public and things when it comes to your science. I think that might be a good way to go, or doing workshops at conferences. But then you also have the aspect too, when you go to a conference, a lot of times you're already, could be a year into your program, continuing education classes on social and traditional media. I really like that. Yeah, so, and I think that's something that should really be encouraged, because while it's maybe not part of like your core program getting through grad school, it's still something that's extremely important, because you know, I made the comment on social media with Michelle's post that if you have bad presentation skills or give a bad interview, you don't really notice how important that is until after the fact, and you're looking at that bad interview or that bad post or whatever else it is that you've made that mistake, and to be able to learn how to deal with all that before that ever becomes a problem, so you can nip it in the bud right away and be a good presenter, be, you know, socially conscious with how you are with your social media. Like, you know, it's amazing the different backgrounds and things that people have, you know, growing up and coming to it, things, and so to be able to like bring them all up to speed on how to operate in that social world, I think is also very important, and how to have good skills with talking to people and interacting with them, because one, you don't want them to embarrass themselves. You want them to be able to get a positive experience out of talking to the public, you know, via social media or traditional media. But two, you also don't want them to embarrass your lab or your university or just science in general. You want them to be good representatives of science, and you have to train them properly to be able to do that. And without that proper training, you're going to have people that are making those mistakes, and, excuse me, you know, so that proper training is really important. And like with me right now with social media, I feel like I'm just kind of wading through it and having to self-teach myself, become self-taught with this. And it would be, I would love to just have someone who has far more experience than me be able to just sit down and have them just teach me. Like, I would sit there for days on end just learning everything that they have and have done and why they do it, and, you know, different ways that they could do it. Like, it would be something that I would find very critical to helping my future in science, because I'm gonna have to be engaged with social media. I'm gonna have to be engaged with traditional media, and to find out better ways to do it, it's gonna be really important. Like, I feel lucky that during my undergrad, I did a minor in broadcast and communication, and I think that's helped me out a lot with stuff. It's by no means replaces the experience that I get by doing this live, and constantly working on it, but it does at least give me a little bit of background that I think puts me a step ahead of other people. And I'm not saying necessarily that every scientist needs, a full-on, set of classes, of minor worthy or like a second major, in any sort of media, but there definitely needs to be at least a baseline of some sort of education when it comes to social media and traditional media for scientists. That is extremely important. It's kind of one of those things that, as scientists, you need to take the time to learn different skill sets, like things like, learning how to do R. We don't have a class, that teaches us how to do R. We're just kind of told to like go and struggle with it and figure it out and how to do it. We still need that in order to be able to do our analyses for a lot of our research. So it's still critically important. And so like a lot of professors and stuff will be much more likely to say, oh yes, go take, a separate class on that, or go to that workshop on that, because they understand the importance of that, because they can see the results of that within the research. But I think media also needs to have that same importance, because if you can't communicate with the public, they're much less likely to give you future funding. If there's a lot of images and media posts out there of, say, something like, I'll use the example of Jordan with the plover. That's an endangered species here in the Great Lakes area. And so their outreach is critically important to creating interest by the public. And so when it comes time for those researchers to ask for funds, because they've been really engaged through social media, it definitely is going to help the public be like, yes, we want to give money to that, versus, a project like, I'll just use lake sturgeon for example, and we'll just, in this example, say that they haven't been posting anything at all. Now, let's say if the lake sturgeon hadn't been posting anything, no one's going to really know about it, or know why that we should protect it, or what makes it interesting, and then they might be that much less likely to give money to it, because they haven't been engaged in a way that drives the public interest to it. So media can really be important, because without those funds, we can't do research, and thus we can't science. And scientists without money, no science happens. I mean, we need the money to be able to, one, get the supplies we need for science, and two, to actually be able to take care of ourselves, because if we don't have money to just basically take care of ourselves, we're going to have to go get other jobs. And so things like that are important. But yeah, any other questions you guys have about stuff? Anything else? If not, I'll save everything else for another time, and I hope this little CliffNotes version makes up a little bit for yesterday's infamous lost broadcast. Other than that, I know we have some future broadcasts probably coming up. I know Katie and I have got things in the works, and we're hoping to get some other people involved with stuff. Also, sounds like I might be doing some live broadcast out in the field with some folks from the University of Toledo. See my relativity page, see a list of other sites. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, definitely, for sure. Oh, thanks, Katie, and thanks for joining and making sure this one actually worked. I'm still disappointed that yesterday didn't work out. It's, to get Ariel actually up here in Michigan, where I could only have to drive 2 hours to go see her, versus driving 14 hours or whatever it is to get down to Arkansas to be able to see her and do something. It was like really completely worked out, and then to have it totally just kind of fall apart because Periscope didn't work properly was really disappointing. But like I said, we'll use this as a learning experience, and make sure you guys all check out Ariel's stuff. She's really awesome on Twitter, and like I said, she's going to make sure that she puts up her stuff from NAOC. So yeah, definitely check her out. She's one of the people I follow most on Twitter, and I really respect her opinions of social media and the use of it. And so, like I said, she's going to put up all of her stuff from NAOC, so you can check that all out. I'll put up everyone's stuff here again, so you guys can all have a chance to be able to follow everyone. These are all the folks that are going to be running that workshop at NAOC. A number of these, like Betsy and Jordan, you know, I see them on Twitter a lot. Oh, good. Hey, that's actually, was that someone just took a screenshot? Is that what that like little thing was? I have not seen that before. With the little camera pop up. Oh, okay, cool. That's good to know. So then I can see like if anyone's actually really appreciating, you know, and taking advantage of putting stuff up. Okay, I like that a lot. But yeah, Jordan does a lot of work on Twitter too. She's probably the person that I work with most of brainstorming different ideas and things like that. So definitely follow her. She's got a lot of really good ideas, and she's also on Instagram a lot. You'll see a whole bunch of really cute pictures of piping plovers, and she will turn you into a plover lover for sure, because all I really want to do now is go out and play with those tiny little puff balls. So yeah, definitely follow her. And anyone else out there that does SciComm stuff, definitely hit me up for things, because I'm really interested in talking to you and helping to grow this. I really want to see where we can take this and use this in science, because I think it's going to be a great tool. So hopefully 2016 this summer is going to be the summer of SciComm for me, and so we're going to see where this goes. So till then, I'll see you guys around, and if you have any other questions or any ideas for future periscopes, definitely let me know. And hey, Carillion Center, glad you guys joined here. I'll pop this up for you guys real quick since you just came in, but we're talking about the people that are doing a SciComm workshop at NAOC in August, and so these are all the people that are running that workshop, and so these are all their Twitter handles. So definitely check all of these folks out. And Ariel said that she's going to post up her stuff from the conference up online for everyone to see, and that will be mid-August when that conference is. So yeah, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to tweet me. I'll answer them the best I can. And anything else, any other ideas you guys have, any if we want to go out in the field, if anyone's around the Great Lakes area and wants to get together and do a Periscope chat about SciComm, you want a Periscope about research, life and science, I'm good with that. If you want to go out in the field and Periscope from there, like you're out in California, yeah, it's just a short plane ride away, right? It might be worth it. But yeah, if you're around and you want to go into the field, hey, I'm kind of like getting itchy to do traveling again. Like I've got to go to Maine next month, and obviously DC the month after that. Like I'm really getting into, like, I feel like I got to be going someplace every month. Like I was in Canada earlier this month, so I'm getting itchy to like just keep doing more and more traveling. So California, it's been probably 6 years since I was out there, so could always go back. But anyways, if you're in the Great Lakes area and you're doing field research and you want me to come out and Periscope and watch you guys do stuff, I would love to do that, because I think that's going to be the really cool thing with Periscope, is actually doing those live broadcasts of people's research. So I'm really interested in doing that. So let me know if you want me to come around, like anywhere Great Lakes area that I can kind of drive to that isn't too horribly far away. I'm definitely interested in doing that, and plus it's always fun to meet people and see their research in person. So yeah, so I hope you guys had fun. I'll see you guys all around, and until then, have a great Tuesday. Bye. Where you went to undergrad and grad school, like how did you get to where you are now?
Okay. So I did my undergrad at the University of Notre Dame, and my undergraduate research started out in aquatic ecology, because there's a big focus, or at least, yeah, I guess there still is a big focus on aquatic ecology there. But then At the beginning of my senior year, I connected with Doris Watt, who's an ornithologist at St. Mary's College, the college across the street, and got involved in doing a directed study in ornithology. And so that kicked off my connection with ornithology and research. After that, I went to graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh. Bill Searcy was my advisor, and about halfway through my time in grad school, he took a job at the University of Miami. And so I moved with him to Miami to finish up grad school there. And so I graduated with my PhD from Miami in 1998. And after that, I did a postdoc in Nevada, working with shorebirds for a couple of years. Did some teaching while I was a postdoc, and because most of my research had been in behavior, and because the funding for behavior research is so tight, I really didn't want my career to be dependent on getting those NSF grants. And I really enjoyed working with students and teaching students, so that's what caused me to apply to places like SUNY Geneseo. So that's sort of how I ended up here after Nevada, and I've been here, I'm in my 15th year here. We're a primarily undergraduate institution, and there's only two programs on campus that have graduate students, and the biology program is not one of them. So that means no graduate students to help with grading in classes, and also no graduate students to help with research. So all of my research colleagues really are the undergraduate students that are working with me.
So how do you feel that undergraduates, how is that process with getting them involved with research? Because, a lot of times most research is done by grad students at other institutions. So do you feel like they're able to do good quality research? Is it maybe just a longer time period to get them up to speed, or do you think they can still do quality work?
I definitely think they can do quality work, and my experience here at Geneseo is we have really well prepared students and motivated students, and they do well academically generally. So they're usually prepared fairly well academically in their background to even start reading some journal articles and getting some background before we start doing research. But probably the sort of ramp up to actually collecting good quality data is longer than it would be for a graduate student, especially if that graduate student came in with some research experience. So, the way my colleagues and I all recruit and sort of mold our undergraduate researchers in different ways, but I usually require students to do a semester of directed study readings with me before they really get into collecting data on a project, so that they have a good background. They write a short proposal for me because I really want them to feel some ownership of the project. If they really feel like it's their project, then they're more likely to make sure they collect good data and they take good notes, and that they're really keeping on top of things.
Do you think that by doing that, it's kind of like simulating them being a grad student by having them write that proposal and everything as they would if they were a grad student doing a full-on research project?
I mean, because I think writing a proposal is a great experience for someone, whether they end up going to graduate school or not. At some point, you're going to have to write some piece of persuasive writing, which is what a proposal is. And so going through the exercise of that is useful for the students, I figure, anyway.
Right. I mean, at some point in time, they're going to have to do it anyways if they want to continue their career in research, and so you're able to help them at least get their toes dipped into the waters.
Right.
So.
And our institution has some small grants that are available just to undergraduates who are doing research, and they have to write a proposal for that. So depending on how well formed their proposal is when they do it for me, then we can look at applying for a small grant for a little bit of equipment or some mileage reimbursement or something like that for a project that they're working on.
How much do you feel like the students here are keen to get involved with research? Do they understand the benefits of it now during their undergrad process, or do you feel like maybe there's not that drive to do it?
No, actually, the students here are all, I would say, generally very interested in getting involved in research. Now, a lot of our students are pre-med or pre-health intentions, and medical schools look favorably on students who have some research experience. I tend to draw students, because I'm working with animals rather than human cells or something, students who might be interested in going to vet school, and also students who are interested in going on to graduate school. But we sort of get all sorts of backgrounds, but they all, or most of them, have gotten the message that undergraduate research is a really great experience, something good to have on your resume or CV, and a good experience going forward. So there are actually more students who are interested in doing research with us than we have opportunities available to them. So if anybody out there is looking for field assistants or lab assistants, research assistants, you can send a message my way, and I probably have the names of some students who would be interested in connecting with you.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, you think of, you guys are around a number of universities that are fairly close by, so it's close enough that they could drive to and help out with other projects. So.
Right. And some of the students would be willing to travel further in the summer if it was summer work.
Right, for sure. So with this university here, and with it being mostly undergrad, do you feel that the undergrads, do they all want to go to grad school? What percentage would you say of people here kind of want to go on, or are they just more getting their bachelor's and moving on to the workforce?
No, actually, most of our students, I would say, if you asked in our freshman class what students come here with what their intentions are, probably 80 to 90% of them would tell you they're going to go to med school. Now, of course, not all of them end up going to med school, but and through the courses they take, students change their minds, either because they don't perform well in courses or because they find something that they're really interested and passionate about. But unfortunately, we have a really small portion of students that come in with an intention of doing field work, ecology type work. So that's a smaller pool for me to draw from. But I have to turn fewer students away, I guess. Maybe that's the upside of that.
So since you're pulling from undergrads, usually when we go to grad school right away, we're doing research, and so we're expected as soon as we step in the door, day one, you're going to be starting to do stuff. When is it that you want to see undergrads start to work in your lab? Do you want them to come right in with their freshman, or you want them to wait a year? What's the best time? Should they get started and get that experience, or what do you feel is best with undergrads?
I think that for the research that I do, so for example, some of my colleagues really want students to have taken organic chemistry and maybe even biochemistry before they start doing research in the lab, and that I would like a student to have taken ecology, so a second semester sophomore for the most part would be my ideal student to attract, or someone in their junior year. I'm at the disadvantage that currently I'm teaching only senior level courses, so a lot of the students in the department don't know who I am until they're seniors, and it's kind of too late for them to get involved. So I have to do a good job of sort of publicizing who I am and what it is that I do to try and hook students earlier on.
So with if a senior was to come in and say, hey, I want to do a research project, is it just the time that they wouldn't have the time to be able to get that research project done, or is it just also maybe that you need to help bring them up to speed to learn how to do it, and being able to get that done in 1 year, or that last semester of their senior year just isn't possible then?
Right. I guess I'd say it's a little bit of both, because especially if they want to do field work, up until this point most of my field work has been done during the summer breaks, and so that's just not available to a senior who's coming to me in the fall of their senior year. I anticipate going into the future there will be some data that they can, soundscape recordings and those sorts of things that they can analyze, and that could potentially be done by a senior, but I'd kind of have to gauge who they were and how well prepared they were to jump right in and do that. there's also almost always a little senioritis that occurs in the spring semester. So I've got, you've got the bringing students up to speed and up until maybe October, and then you've got a month and a half before the semester's over, and then you've got, maybe 2 months in the spring semester for a senior where you might expect them to
be
really
full
be
on, really work
engaged.
hard. Yeah.
So, there are a number of different factors I'd have to consider before taking a senior on.
So tell us a little bit more about your research. Exactly what is it that you do, and where is it that you do it? Is it this area, or do you go, outside of New York to do research?
So I've tried to focus the main focus of my research here in Western New York and make it really local. So I did make a change to my research focus in the last 4 or 5 years. After I got tenure and went on sabbatical, I did some soul searching and hard thinking about the research that I was doing up until tenure and sort of what my expectations were and whether those were reasonable. And I also began interacting and collaborating with a couple people in the geography department.
Okay.
So I started to think, we started to mull about some projects. So one of those is the development of an eco-atlas, which was basically an online regional atlas focusing on the Genesee River region, where we would be able to sort of put data that's collected into GIS layers so that people can sort of examine spatial relationships among all sorts of different factors, and with the idea that lots of different people could sort of plug their research into this atlas. And so and I was working on a class with another geography professor, got me really thinking about sort of spatial things spatially in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. And so that, together with my interest in focusing a little bit more on communication behavior and vocalizations. I work primarily with birds. I started thinking about the research that was coming out initially primarily out of Europe, looking at the effects of anthropogenic noise on communication behavior in birds, and thinking that this would be something really interesting to do in this region because we have sort of natural transect from a rural area where the college is located here up through an urban area in Rochester, and be able to look at how different species are responding to that anthropogenic noise across that transect, and then also look more broadly at sort of soundscapes across that transect and see if we could use those soundscapes as a way of assessing biodiversity sort of in general across the region. So I've had students working on sort of both of those things. I had one student who graduated a couple years ago looking at a handful of local species and how their songs responded to anthropogenic noise. And I presented some of her work at NAOC this summer. And then another one of my current students is looking at soundscapes in forest plots around the region to see if the diversity in sounds there reflects the biodiversity in those forest plots. And so anyway, he's still working on analyzing that data, but he presented some of it at NAOC this summer, and will be presenting at a regional conference in the spring semester as well.
Right. So as you guys can tell, we're currently outside here, and it's the middle of November in New York, which we probably really shouldn't be. It normally should not be this warm.
No,
so
this is an unnaturally warm afternoon that we decided to take advantage of, which is a little frightening considering what we know about climate change.
And so, like, I'm interested, is any of your work, have you looked at, some of the impacts that climate change might be having on the bird species around here? Have you noticed any impacts with what you've looked at, or?
That hasn't really been a focus of my research, but actually, so one of my other new students is starting to look at I guess it's wrong to call them vocalizations, but insect acoustic communication, which is strongly controlled by temperature. So if you look at the trills that insects make in
Right.
colder weather, it's slower. If the weather stays warmer longer, if we don't get a hard freeze, then they're going to be communicating for longer into the fall. So again, that's something that we've just started to examine and will be tracking going forward. So it's something that we could potentially examine. If you come back in 10 years and ask me, I might have an answer to that question.
Well, I also wonder, too, as more and more focus gets put onto climate change, how much more of our research money is going to have to be going to that to help address the changes, because we know it's happening, but
Right.
now I think some of it is, okay, how is it impacting different species that we have? And there's such unique, diversity and amazingness in the Great Lakes area here, so
There
to be
is.
able to see what's happening, like, are all of a sudden all the birds that we have down here, are they all on the other side of the lake up in Canada now?
Right,
We're not seeing them here, so there's, I think, some real possibilities of, and I also find it interesting too with the fact that you have birds migrating. You can really kind of track that climate change with them as well, because they're going to be coming up sooner in the spring, maybe later in the fall. So it's kind of one easy way to
and there's
track
some
that.
colleagues at some local institutions that are examining that sort of migratory behavior. One of the longest running bird observatories, bird banding labs in the country is right outside of Rochester on Braddock Bay on the south side of Lake Ontario. So they've been catching birds there for almost 40 years now and banding them. So they have a huge record there.
It'd be interesting to know how it's impacting the vocalizations. Are their breeding seasons becoming longer or shorter? And can you tell that by the vocalization? So I mean, there's so many cool possibilities of what you could study with that.
Yeah. So, and I'm hoping that as we go back repeatedly to the same places to make soundscape recordings year after year, that's the sort of thing that we can track. But unfortunately, we've been doing that for such a short period of time, really just about 4 years now, that I don't imagine, I haven't looked for a signal, but I don't imagine there's a signal in there right now.
Yeah, you don't have that long enough data set yet to be able to do it, but maybe 20 years down the road.
Yeah, if only I'd been bright enough to think about this, setting this up 15 years ago.
Right. So since you do soundscape stuff, have you thought about doing any sort of other types of remote sensing along with your research?
I haven't really, although I've been watching your Twitter feed and your sort of fun with drones postings. So that's really, it is kind of intriguing, but I haven't really thought about how that would fit into my my work, and I don't think we could probably, drones are pretty noisy, so I don't think we could take acoustic recordings very well with them. But
I actually, at NAOC or ANOC, however you want to say, there was actually someone that presented there that was using a drone or UAS, however you want to say it, and they had a recorder hanging down off the bottom of it, far enough away that it kind of mitigated the noise of it,
motors,
so you wouldn't notice it, and then you're actually getting recordings of birds.
That's super cool.
So that's a possibility right there for you. And then, the other thing too is maybe you're able to reach areas that might be hard to hike into other stuff, or maybe, up towards the top of the trees where you might not be picking up that sound all the way down below, but maybe up above you could.
Yeah, all of those warblers that we get warbling and trying to look up at, we could look down on them instead and listen down on them.
Right. So what's the most unique bird that you've seen around here that might be something like, this was like a once-in-a-decade kind of thing that you saw around here?
I'm really bad at these sorts of questions, remembering. I'm not much of a lister. I mean, I love to go out birding, but sorry, ornithology peeps.
I can't attest she did have her bird book and binoculars right at the back door there, you're ready to look out.
Yes, it's next to the dining room table, so we're ready to go. The most unique that I've seen around here, oh golly. Oh, well, okay, all right, so my husband and I got married a couple of years ago on the 28th of December, the year when there was the big eruption of snowy owls around the Great Lakes. And so we clambered out onto this icy pier in Rochester that goes out into Lake Ontario so that we could get close enough to one of these snowy owls that was perched out there to get a photo of
You got it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Yeah, there was that snowy owl that was flying up towards that camera, that traffic camera in Montreal that was Twitter famous for a while earlier this year, and I was just, I seriously, like, I went onto Google Maps and figured out exactly where it
Where
was
it
because I was so excited about it.
Oh, yeah, they were amazing birds, and there were a number of them around the area here
Really?
where you could go and reliably see them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm coming back here. So you went to NAOC, right?
Right.
What'd you think of the conference? You know, having gone to other conferences and stuff, like, what'd you think of the conference?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm a natural introvert, so big conferences are, even after so many years, are a little overwhelming to me. So it was exciting, but also a little overwhelming. And it's always so difficult when you've got 8 or 12 different sessions going on at once, to try and decide what it is that you want to go and pay some attention to.
You're always going to miss something.
Yes. Although this is the first conference that I live tweeted at and paid attention to the Twitter feeds.
Commerce, we got another one.
And that was really interesting and useful to be able to see, what people were talking about in the other sessions, and to see outside of that published abstract, what the people in the audience thought were the most important points that were coming out of the different talks. So I really appreciated that.
Did you feel like by doing that live tweeting that you were able to be more engaged? Because I've heard different people say sometimes they feel like they're more engaged because they're actually listening for those things that they're going to then repeat and tweet back out, and then other people feel like, well, I'm just searching for that one thing and I'm so absorbed that I'm not really picking up everything that someone is talking about. So, like, how do you feel like your experience was with that?
I guess the talks that I thought were going to be most directly connected with my research and my research interests, I actually took notes on a piece of notebook paper, and the other talks that I attended that I was just interested in were the ones that I was more likely to live tweet, just because there were some talks that I really didn't want to miss.
Right. No, yeah, I totally understand.
Things, and I'm not quite as fast as my thumbs with my thumbs as some other people are, so.
Can't go like 1,000,000 miles an hour on it yet.
No.
We'll get you there.
Yeah.
We'll get you there. Yeah, because sometimes I debate back and forth. Like, as much as I love live tweeting, I do it mostly, I think, to be able to share the amazing research that other people are doing.
Right.
And I like being able to have that kind of like electronic note taking I have. Sometimes I do wonder, am I missing something as I'm live tweeting because I'm so focused on getting that next tweet versus getting the whole
story.
Right. And so like I kind of go back and forth with that sometimes, but being a SciCommer, I tend to err on the side of let's live tweet because I want everyone who might not be able to be there to be able to experience it, or even someone like that might be at the conference but maybe couldn't make that talk, so to be able to like share that and help people get excitement over that one particular talk, and they're more likely to engage hopefully with that researcher later on and find out more.
Yeah. So I don't know, I had fun here on campus last Friday live tweeting our department seminar, and I think I might try and do that a little more often, just to sort of show the world that we do have a little bit of science going on here, even at this small undergraduate institution.
Well, I mean, no matter where you're at, as long as you are doing science and rocking it out, you can have some really interesting stuff going on, and to be able to share it with other people, it's a great way to showcase, because say like you might go to more regional conferences, and a national or international conference might not be something that you're able to do every year, being from a smaller university, so people aren't as exposed to the research. But by doing SciComm, you can expose that to an international audience and get them engaged that way. So
that's my hope.
Yeah. Now, you did say something earlier about how you moved during your PhD, I believe that was, to a different university, and I've heard of a couple of students having to do that, and so like I was just interested in what your experience was like having to do that transition because your advisor moved.
Yeah, it was difficult, I'll say. I had been at University of Pittsburgh for 2 years when my advisor got this job at the University of Miami, and so after 2 years I'd sort of figured out my place in the program and sort of could see how I could move through the program and was sort of comfortable. I was also comfortable in the city. I had moved to a new city, and so I had met friends and made friends at this new place. So the move was initially a bit traumatic. In the end, it was traumatic. Maybe maybe it wasn't traumatic, but it was
definitely
an upset.
Yeah.
And then, but when I got to Miami, it ended up being a better place for me because there were more people who were working at the organismal level or above who were really more appropriate for me to be interacting with, sort of scientifically. And in the end, it worked out just fine. I kept my research project, which I'd started up in Pennsylvania. So while all of the other graduate students in Miami were going off to exotic tropical places to do their research, I traveled with the snowbirds and would go back up to Pennsylvania in the summertime and do my research at the Pima Tuning Lab of Ecology in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, and then come back to Miami in the fall.
Okay. Well, we're getting ready to wrap things up because we have a bunch of other things that we gotta go do today.
On the schedule.
Yes. So I'm gonna throw this back up here, and if you have any last-minute questions for Christy or myself, feel free to send it in here real quick. Otherwise, definitely feel free to contact Twitter at WildlifeBioGal or BirdGirl1, and then, like I said earlier, log into wildlifebiogal.com to be able to see this broadcast on Periscope, or also I'll be uploading it probably a couple days from now by the time I get back home up to YouTube, and then also do the podcast on SoundCloud as well. But yeah, with that, I don't know if you've got any last little tidbits that you want to send out to everyone.
Oh, well, I mean, hello from a small undergraduate institution. Just to say that, we've got great undergraduate students who are going to be going on to graduate programs all over the country, and we've got some good science that's going on here. So keep your eye on those small places because there can be some really interesting stuff happening here.
All right, that's something very much to be said. I think I've been telling a lot of students lately, it's not always where it is you go and the size of it, it's what you make of it. Right. And you can have a really awesome experience at a smaller school just like you can at a larger school. It's what you are going to do going into that school. If you're willing to put yourself out there and go meet a professor and say, hey, do you need assistance with research? I want to get involved with it.
Right.
Let me know what I need to do. So it's putting you at, willing to walk yourself out of that dorm room and go experience what that university has to offer, because even a smaller school has a lot to offer.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. And maybe more hands-on connection with the professors than you might get at a bigger institution for an undergraduate who might need that
right
when they're getting started.
I would assume you have smaller class sizes here, so you get to know your students a little bit better, where at a larger institution they may never know your name and might not even recognize your face at all, even if they've had you in multiple classes. So yeah, that's something to really be said if you feel like you want more of that hands-on experience and being able to interact with the faculty. A smaller school might be the way to go.
For you.
Yeah. So with that, since I don't see any questions coming in, we're going to sign off, and I'm going to encourage you all to go see if you can go find a snowy owl where you are, because I'm really jealous that Christy got to see one. So if you guys can let me know where some snowy owls are, kind of tweet that in. I'm going to go track them down, because you can't be the only one that's seen them. I want to go see them too. So
next time they show up, I'll tweet it out.
Yeah.
You all can come and stay with me to see your snowy owl.
Yep. So go find some snowy owls, and then tune in at 4 o'clock. Yeah, that's when I do my talk.
Right.
Yeah. I should probably actually remember when I'm giving my own talk. But yeah, 4 o'clock, tune back in. Christy will be the person behind the camera, as I give my seminar talks. So I'll be talking about mute swans and their impacts in the Great Lakes. So tune back in about an hour and a half from now, and we'll have some mute swan research for you live from SUNY Geneseo. So Geneseo.
Yeah. That's okay. Everyone has trouble with that.
If I'm already having trouble now, that the talk later is going to be really interesting. So anyways, all right, you guys have a great afternoon, and tune back in for mute swans later on. So till then, have a good one.
See you in the Twitterverse.